in universities. However, before we get into these concerns, I'd like to some terminology that I'd like for you to be aware of. So these are 3 terms that are important for you to know. The first is diversity. In this case, diversity is meant to address anything related to personal identity, including, but not limited to, race, gender, sex, sexual orientation, religion, creed, ability, veteran status, age, and socioeconomic status. The second term is dominant and subdominant as opposed to majority and minority. As identity and diversity are related to social structures and power, the terms of dominant and subdominant are more applicable than majority and minority. While it is true that in some cases this can be the minority part of the population, that's not always the case. Consider, for example, South African apartheid. So, with that in mind, and understanding that we're discussing power structures, I'll be using the terms dominant and subdominant. Finally, immersive experience. This is where all parties involved are immediately involved in the experience. It's not something they've read about or discussed necessarily, although that may be a part of it, but it is something that they have lived firsthand. Is the problem. So here's the challenge. According to the world today, it is becoming more reliant on worldwide interactions to support a global economy. As such, educational institutions must keep in mind that their graduates need to be prepared for interactions on a global scale. These citizens must be prepared to face unique ideas, interesting challenges, and different cultures. This means a focus on diversity is necessary for the students of today, the leaders of tomorrow. More than this, research demonstrates the importance of diversity as it relates to education, critical thinking, and workforce preparedness. Education demonstrates the importance of diversity not only in the shifting demographic it serves, but in its ability to develop students. Critical thinking, seen as viewing the world with new eyes, not taking things at face value, and finding creative solutions, also is meant to address diversity. Particularly, it has begun to redefine how we view diversity, no longer focusing on just race or gender. And finally, workforce preparedness. Our workforce is required more and more to be globally focused to become a member of the larger international community. Technology has begun a shift over the last century as far as the values and views of the world. But it once more ties into this concern over diversity. Specifically, I'm going to look at this through the lens of student affairs. Reiser and Roper note that student affairs should meet the needs of the students, as well as the mission and goals of the university. They recognize these as the 2 most important aspects of student affairs. We have come to define student affairs selectively to include, typically, the staff of an institution. Oftentimes we disregard faculty and administration. This, in turn, completely disregards, for example, ASU's mission statement, which says, ASU is a comprehensive public research university measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed, advancing research and discovery of public value, and assuming fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities it serves. I'd like to go back and focus on the line, not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. Here at ASU, our own mission is to include students, not just to include them, but to help them succeed. This is the task given to all members of the institution, the challenge that has been thrown down, as it were. And we have seen that diversity is one of the greatest challenges. This is reflected by the students. They fear being labeled as bigoted in any way, but in particular as being identified as racist. While racist attitudes may persist, there is social stigma directly attached with being recognized as racist, and students wish to avoid that. We shouldn't turn assist them. Done when it comes to assisting students. Numerous approaches are offered to dealing with this concern of diversity. The most common approach is to ignore it. Ignoring diversity is ignoring our commitment to students and our institution, however. So we reach a second approach. This approach is the idea that diversity education is to have some form of diversity or world educational course within the curriculum. The thing is, definition of diversity for these courses is widespread. It rarely addresses the issues that they were designed to address. You can find stories throughout the internet where a jazz music course, where they literally just listen to jazz music, covers diversity. Or Transylvanian literature, where they actually read Dracula, even though it's not Transylvanian literature. And you also find stories of students or parents concerned over the course requirements. For example, several years ago, UNC Chapel Hill got in a great deal of trouble for having students read the Quran for one of their courses. Several parents threw a fit over this. But here's the thing about diversity as a part of the curriculum. Majors today are so regulated in order to meet state board requirements that managing to find space where an additional diversity credit can fit is oftentimes difficult to do. So then we reach the third approach that's been seen. Programs and events focused on diversity. Here's the thing. These are a single moment in time. Imagine, for an example, the program referred to as Cross the Line, where statements are read, and if the statement applies to you, you step forward, you cross the line, as it were. These programs and events, sometimes stretched as long as a weekend, they cover one aspect in depth, or they brush the top of several aspects. And as it relates to involving students, these things rarely motivate deeper reflection or any form of comparison and connection. This all fails to work, as students will tend to retreat into their bubbles of isolation, and they surround themselves by students who share similar views and experiences, an issue that has only been further exacerbated with the introduction of social media on college campuses, which allow students to build their own world, seeing only what they want to see. Greek life has some incredible examples where we've seen this fail in action. In 2013, white Alabama sororities came under fire for their handling of a young black woman going through recruitment, essentially dismissing a promising candidate for no demonstrable reason. This is a story that is shared and seen across the country. You may remember the OU song. In 2015, a very racist song was recorded from a member of a white fraternity at Oklahoma University. It's important to note that students on campus recognized that this was not an isolated event, nor was it isolated to a single fraternity. And going back to our example of ASU, in 2014, ASU came under fire when a fraternity hosted a blackface party on Martin Luther King Day. Again, these incidents arose because students are able to isolate themselves in situations where they are not faced with challenging or different ideas. Aston, writing in 1993, recognizes that fraternal organizations become bastions of white male supremacy. The thing is, Greek life has an impact not only at institutions, but well beyond into the political and economic scope, and this impact is well documented. Speaking from reports from 2014, 85% of U.S. Supreme Court justices since 1910 were members of Greek life organizations. 63% of all U.S. presidential cabinet members since 1900 were members of Greek letter organizations. .76% of U.S. senators since 1900, 85% of Fortune 500 executives since 1955, which was the beginning of the Fortune 500 charts, 71% of the men who appear in Who's Who in America as of 2014 were members of Greek letter organizations. Since 1877, 18 U.S. presidents have been members of fraternities. And according to the 2003 list, 120 of Forbes 500 CEOs were members of Greek letter organizations, including 10 of those from the top 30. These are men and women who, in essence, are running the country. Primarily, they are white men, coming from those bastions of white male supremacy, as noted by Aston. There are things National Panhellenic Council, which is made up of 9 historically black Greek organizations. These organizations in their history have a great focus on civil rights and other community efforts and initiatives, and we've seen other cultural and identity-based Greek letter organizations arise in a similar fashion. But again, see that Greek life fails. For example, for a number of these organizations, those that fall in the historically and traditionally white Greek letter organizations, non-white members could not join in many cases until the late 60s or 70s. In fact, not all that long ago, there were still Southern Pride parades. These organizations have a great opportunity for impact. However, these organizations did not recognize racial diversity, even when their leaders were going on to posts of national importance regularly. So then, provide, what do we have to offer? And here's the thing. Institutions benefit from having diversity. And diversity is sought after by institutions so that they can benefit from this. And it's a resource that can and should be put to use. Institutions currently have a great deal of diversity. It may not all be visible, but it is there and available. Dr. Rupert Nakash shares that diversity will exist when the mix of people from a wide variety of niches of society is such that the existence of a conflict of ideas is unavoidable. What matters is that institutions rarely put this aspect to use, and diversity is rarely seen beyond recruitment flyers. So we've seen throughout history, diversity pops up in the curriculum. Single moments and retreats, it's ignored. We need to move beyond that into something more expansive. How do we do that? Experiences regularly. They benefit from these immersive educational experiences. The reason being that these experiences insert students into a conflict of ideas, which creates discord. This discord, in turn, requires reflection and thought. This should occur regularly, though through a student experience. This personalizes the experience for students and places a name with a face when discussing diversity. This is important in order to make sure that these ideas of diversity stick for the student. The reason being is that it becomes more than, oh, my black friend, or the black fraternities are having a step show. It becomes more than going to a drag show. It is about learning about the culture, the values, beliefs, and ideas that support a different approach to life. Students are pushed to begin considering a world beyond their own frame of reference, beyond their own ethnocentrism. It is important to note, however, that the ownership of this change should not lie on the students, particularly those who are being asked to share their culture, their story. Education lies with the institution. These groups are already providing these events and opportunities, and it's important to have students engage in these while providing additional education material, whether that be some form of writing, reflection, or other opportunities for students to engage and connect with the experience. Thank you for your time, and please have a wonderful day.